Welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm Diona Brown, and my beautiful co-host here.
I'm Tiffanie DeVan.
And we are here for our Hot Topics section. So today we thought it would be great to talk about college fairs. This is a time of year, when students are going to college fairs, to meet with representatives from different institutions to see what colleges that they might be interested in. So we thought this would be a great topic right now, since a lot of students are engaging in that right now during this time of year.
Absolutely. And another thing for that, for those post-secondary schools, it's also an opportunity for them to showcase what their schools have, what makes their schools unique, and possibly even do some on-site recruiting, on-site admissions, if the need fits for them. So for Diona, what I was thinking, maybe we can kind of talk about just some of the tips that you could offer to the students on how to prepare, on what things that they should look for when it's time to actually go to a college fair.
Absolutely. I think the very first thing that they should definitely do is try to get a listing of the colleges that are going to be there first, because you want to kind of see, are my wish schools at this actual college fair? And then kind of get a lay of the land so that you know where in the room those schools are at, so that you can make sure that you meet with those representatives. I think it's also good to make sure that you have a list of questions in hand in regards to what you kind of want to ask them, so then that way, when you get up to that representative, you're already prepared with what you want to say. Yeah. So for example, you might want to ask them, well, what's a typical day like on campus for a freshman? That's a great question to ask them. So remember, of course, when you apply to a school, as part of the application process, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing that school to see if that's going to be a good fit for you. So you want to have some of the questions in mind so that you're able to gather that information to see if that might be a school that you might want to do an on-site campus visit with.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I think in part of the preparation with preparing for the college fair, some things I tell students also is make sure that you have all of your key information available before you go. Like, have an idea of what your SAT and ACT scores look like. Remember what your GPA was like. Any specific courses that you've taken, you've prepared for, have that information, because sometimes the admissions folks will ask that particular information of them, and sometimes they will actually let you know whether or not you can get in right there on the spot. So not all college fairs are just for information. Some will actually allow you to apply and then possibly even waive an application fee, but you got to be prepared to have your information. I also think for some students, depending on the grade level you're on, you prepare a little bit differently. So if you're someone who's in 8th grade and you're going to a college fair, just take it all in.
Right.
Look at what the students are doing, look at what the schools are doing, look at the various types of schools that are there. It's not just going to be your traditional four-year school, even two-year schools. Trade schools are there. Folks like us at PHEAA are there to talk about the money and the financial aid piece. And sometimes even employers are there.
Yeah, military.
Yeah, so
Yep.
We have them as well. And I think 9th and 10th grade, it's a great opportunity to really just test out all of the different schools. Even schools you're not interested in, you think you may not be interested in, they may have something special that intrigues you. Go on up, talk to them, and then that's your way. Maybe over the next couple of years, you can kind of like really hone in on what you're interested in, what you're not. Junior and senior year, like you said, have that list of schools. You know which schools are coming, or you've had a chance to canvass those schools. What are those schools that you're really interested in attending, and make sure you visit them.
Absolutely.
Talk to them. The next set of schools are those schools that you really know nothing about. I've never heard of that school before. You know what? Here's your opportunity to go talk to them. It's a lot different than doing a college visit, which costs money because you now have to get up, go to the school. So here's it's like the preliminary visit, I think, before you actually go to their campus, just to decide. Maybe they have a program that you never even thought about, and it's intriguing. Get to know the answers to some of the questions you didn't even think you would have had. And then if it sparks an interest, that's where you can do a little bit more research with those particular schools. Another thing I was saying, aside from the applications themselves, I always tell students to think about asking the schools those certain questions, like, what makes aside from the application process, what type of student are you looking for at your school? They know that they're thinking, hey, on our application, we're going to talk about the academics. We might talk about extracurricular activities, but there's a certain type of student that most schools are looking for. Well, what is that particular student?
Right.
just to see if you're a good fit for them.
I think it's also important for students to ask about the major that they plan on going into, if they already have that in mind. Make sure that that school is good for their major, and then also ask what kind of resources are available for students. What kind of counseling services, what kind of tutoring services, what kind of career placement do they have after graduation? Those are also some things that may not be top of mind for students, but those are important questions to ask the representatives as well. And then, of course, one of my big questions, how is the food? Okay, all right. Well, how is the food on campus? Because you're going to be spending a lot of time at that school. You know, you're going to have your meal plan set up. So you want to make sure, you know, get the inside scoop, you know, what kind of food, what kind of things like that, you know, not just the academic side, but the cultural side, the life side. What is my everyday life going to be like at this school?
Like at that little look into college life.
Yes.
What's it really feel like? And that is a good question. So now I'm going to try and take you back a little bit. And I don't know if you can remember, because we're both in the same age bracket. Can you remember, did you have the opportunity to do college fairs?
I did.
And what was your experience like as the student?
It was very overwhelming, because I would say, you know, I had no idea how many colleges even existed at that point. So I'm coming out of high school, you know, coming out of a small, relatively small city. And I felt very overwhelmed, and also felt intimidated because, you know, there's basically adults there. And so you're coming out of high school and you really don't know what to ask unless you've done that research ahead of time. So I remember feeling a bit overwhelmed. But I think that the representatives at the certain colleges made me feel more comfortable with talking to them. And then once you start that conversation going, then you kind of can go from there. But yeah, I remember feeling big time overwhelmed.
Yep, I remember that too. And I didn't have an opportunity to go to a lot of college fairs. There just weren't as many coming to our area at that time. And, you know, I'm aging myself, but we're talking several decades ago. But now students have that opportunity. And I always say, take advantage of that opportunity. I do remember, like you said, what it was like. It's an intimidating process. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that we actually have a brochure for students. It's called Navigating, how to navigate through a college fair. And it gives students tips on how to prepare, what to take advantage of. And it also provides sample questions. And Diona and I, for those of you who are listening, we're going to actually tell you what some of those specific questions are that you will see on here. You can actually go to our website and download it. It makes it easier. But one thing, like you said, Diona, you were nervous and it was a little overwhelming. So everyone knows that is the case. And for the students who are listening, or even the parents, I always say, if your kids are nervous, if you're nervous, that's okay. Go up and still talk to them anyway, nerves and all, because we realize you're going to be nervous. We don't expect you to come up like well rehearsed on everything and ask all of the right questions. But we also don't want you to miss out on this opportunity to talk to the schools, get to know what they're about, with things like that. So just ask the questions, be brave enough to do it. And an experience that I see now on the other end, and I know you do too, we're at the college fairs, we're behind the tables, and students sometimes will come up and they'll just stand and they're nervous and they don't have a clue of what, you know, they should be saying, or maybe they just get overwhelmed. And I think that's where this one handout comes in hand, because they don't have to feel as nervous or overwhelmed. We're giving them a guide of what things that they could actually ask, or things that they should be thinking about, like you were just saying. And that kind of just starts the conversation going. Absolutely. And sometimes you get folks behind the table that'll just say, hey, come on over. Let me tell you about what we offer. Remember that each school is going to tell you the best information that they have about their school, what's going to make it look appealing. But you want to ask the tough questions for the, you know, not so good things. What challenges, excuse me, do your students face at your school? And of course, we can't forget the financial aid question.
That's the part we'll
tackle into that too.
Yes, like one of the tough questions, and this is one of the questions that you'll see in our brochure, is you should ask them, you know, what is the total cost of your school? Not just the tuition, but the room and board, the fees, everything that's going to go into your cost of attendance, because that's the actual amount that you really need to prepare for. So don't be afraid to have those discussions with the schools as well. You know, that's something that you definitely should consider when you're determining which one is going to be the best fit for you.
Yep. So I call those the show me the money questions.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
The show me the money questions. You mentioned another thing about that is, what percentage of your students actually receive need-based financial aid? How much of their need is met is also a good question to ask. I tell students also, is to ask them, do you offer scholarships? Are your list of scholarships available on your website?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes your admissions team may not know all of the information about financial aid, but they can direct you to the area that does if they don't. And then some are well versed with them. Also, sometimes with some college fairs, sometimes it's an alumni who graduated that's the representative, because maybe there wasn't a person who they could bring into that particular area. Maybe they're far away, but they have like an alumni association that comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the representative. So if they don't have the information, they'll give it to you. Make sure you follow up and find out about the financial aid piece. So that's another cool point. Anything else on the show me the money? What can they expect? When can they expect to learn about acceptance into the school, as well as the financial aid award notification, things too like that? Those are also good questions. And I think you shared with me something on one of these where it shows generally you want to save the questions that you can find on Google or on their website for a later time.
Yes.
Ask the questions that you can't always get an answer to on paper or just by reviewing. So have the conversation.
Yep.
It makes it an easier thing for you to kind of do your research later.
And I think it's important to take notes too.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're just doing it on your phone, pull out your notes,
Mm-hmm.
make notes, because you're going to be talking to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you go to multiple college fairs.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you're taking notes so that you don't get the information mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can, and you do find one that you're interested in, schedule that college visit right there at the college fair if you can. A lot of times schools will even give incentives for you to do college tours. They might offer you some type of voucher, if you decide to go to that school, some type of institutional aid, maybe a voucher for the bookstore. So make sure you take advantage of any type of an incentive that college is offering as well. And also don't forget about the other resources that may be at the college fair besides just the colleges, for example, PHEAA.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we are at college fairs to give you information on financial aid to help for college, also different employment opportunities, different career folks. So don't be afraid to stop and talk to those folks as well, because they can be important resources for you.
Right. And I always a lot of times the students will not come to our table.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking with the different schools, they'll say, you want to make sure, they'll kind of guide them our way.
Oh, yeah.
And then other students who know what the financial aid piece is like, they will rush to the table. And I always say, it's okay. Take your time from 9th grade to 12th grade. Guaranteed, you're going to get to know who we are,
Mm-hmm.
because all the interest you have in these schools, it comes with a cost. So you want to make sure that you're prepared on the financial aid side. So I totally agree. Come to the financial aid tables if you see us there. So if you see a PHEAA there, if you don't see PHEAA there, ask about PHEAA. Ask about the financial aid. Ask about the FAFSA applications, because we're all a part of that same process.
And I have a funny story about that. I was recently at a college fair, and I had a teacher, and he was on top of it. I mean, he was directing everybody to my table. He said, well, do you have money to pay for college? I overheard him talking to the students. So he'd be like, do you have money to pay for college? No. Well, this is who you need to see. You need to see this lady right here. You need to see. And I mean, he was just ushering the students over, which was good, which was very good. So.
And that's a good point. And I'll actually say her name because she just did one of our previous podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle Martin was on.
Oh, yes.
When she would be attending those financial aid nights, she would always point every student over, just like straight over. So I could see them going from her, looking over at me, and then they would come straight over to me, because her thing was, I need you all to have that interest in the schools, but you got to be able to know how to pay for it. So they were a great resource for making sure that students knew the importance of the financial aid piece, and not just making sure that they attended, went to every single table. But,
absolutely.
And the other part to that is make sure that a lot of the schools, when they're there, they'll say, hey, why don't you sign up, give me your information, or fill out this postcard so that you can be added to our mailing list. And the one thing I tell students, it's very, very important to remember, and we've said this before, make sure you have a professional email address to list on there. So they're going to ask for that. They're going to take your information because they want to make sure that they're going to keep you up to date on all of the things happening with their school and checking back to see if you're interested in admissions. But also, once you have their information, you now have access to other venues of being able to say, hey, this was the admissions team, but I'm trying to get linked to this particular school of nursing or school of whatever within there. And if you can't find that, you now have a contact in which, you can reach out and get some additional information on there. But make sure it's a professional email address. I always tell students, going forward. Make it a professional email address and make it an email address that you're going to check often.
I think it's also important to separate your personal email address from that email address, because a lot of times, a lot of things can get lost if you have your personal and, your colleges, maybe your scholarship people that you're applying to, sending things to that email address. So it is kind of good to create a separate email for all of that type of interaction so that you don't get things mixed up. Very good point.
Some other things I talk about. What can you expect? So we already covered one. Expect to be nervous. It is okay. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I always say when you're in settings like this, it's something new. You're anxious, you're excited. And then sometimes I also tell students, avoid just gathering with your friends in a corner because you're nervous or you don't want to be the student that just kind of like goes off on their own. Do it anyway, because that's how you're going to achieve, get closer to the goals that you want to get to. You got to venture out and you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort level, step outside of what your friends are doing. If all of your friends are saying, hey, we want to go to a trade school, and you're like, I'm still considering all options. Go to all of them. Don't just stick within your circle. Another thing I always say, expect long lines at some of the most popular schools. So sometimes it's like there's going to be a certain school that's more popular than others. So everyone's crowding around that table. That's okay. Instead of you standing in that long line, hit up the other ones that you want to go to and then circle back to them.
That's a good point.
But still hit them. But sometimes you're going to have a long line. Just don't let that deter you from actually getting the information you need from those particular schools. And by all means, it's a great opportunity. So you want them to take advantage of it. Another thing I say, when you're talking to those schools, some schools at college fairs actually are giving out fee waivers with the applications. So ask, hey, do you have any, hey, fill this out. Are they going to, let's get you some more information. Let's get this application completed. Hey, great. But by the way, do you guys offer like fee waivers? Sometimes they wait for you to ask for them before they give them to you. And then some of them are voluntarily given that. If they don't, that's fine, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And I always tell students, it doesn't hurt to ask that information.
All good, all great points.
Other part I was going to say is after the fair. So what are we doing after the fair? So after the fair is over, like you said, hopefully they've had an opportunity to talk to the schools, ask questions of the schools. Schools usually come with their swag bags and you get some swag that you can take along with you, but make sure you get their brochures, whether it's a certain program of study you're interested in, or if it's just the school itself. Get all of that information. And then when you're at home or at another time, you get a chance now to go through the information. The top schools you were considering, start with those. What are the pros? What are the cons with the school? What are their deadlines? When do they want their college applications to be completed, as well as supporting documentation that needs to go along with it? When
is the financial aid information due?
Yes.
Big one.
Have that as well. And then once you've kind of like narrowed it down, I think for like junior year, what would you say, 10 to 15? For me, I think 10 to 15 is a good number. Your junior year to have as your top list. Senior year, I always say keep it within 5 if you can.
Yeah, narrow it down. Narrow it down at that point. Yeah, definitely. And then don't be afraid to, like you were saying with technical schools, don't just limit what you think you're supposed to go to. There's tons of great opportunities out there at technical schools, at community college, not just your traditional 4-year college or universities. So don't be afraid to explore opportunities at those types of institutions as well. So I think that keeping an open mind and really, using that opportunity to explore different schools that you may not have been aware of are all some great tips. And then also, again, make sure that if you do find a school that you're interested in, make sure that you schedule that opportunity to visit that school on campus.
Absolutely.
Because it's great talking to these schools, at a college fair, but there's nothing like going to campus and actually seeing how the school is for yourself.
And then another point to that is, so here's the college fair. And then you move on. Let's talk about the college tour. Because if you're on a tour, whether it's an individual tour or whether it's a specific, like a whole group of students, whether the school went, several schools have gone into community thing, you may have a lot of folks on campus and they make it look amazing. When you're coming onto the campus, they have all of the activities, all the students there, and it looks appealing and it looks delightful. However, I always say, try to schedule it at a time where they will allow you to sit in possibly in a classroom setting.
Yeah.
See what the classes are looking like. Is it a good classroom size for you? Are you
Right.
comfortable with a big class, small class? Also ask about the accessibility of the professors. You know, maybe you're someone who likes individualized time with the professor. What are their office hours like? Are they accessible to a student beyond the classroom time? I think that's a good question to ask as well.
Right.
And then also in addition to that, like you said, like with the from a tourist standpoint, not everyone's able to go to a tour. Do a virtual tour.
Yeah,
there's virtual
tours on the websites.
Yep. So you'll have your college fair, you have your pick of your schools, schedule the tour. If you can't do the tour in between doing the actual tour on the campuses, check them out. Because after COVID, so many schools now allow you to view their campus virtually. And many of them kept that feature. So if that's the case, you can kind of look into like the different aspects, the college life. I don't know how deep they let you see into their cafeterias or like the different food locations.
But if I was considering a school, because it can vary drastically from campus to campus, believe me. And if you're a foodie like me and you're going to be spending, up to 4 years or possibly beyond, you want to make sure that they have what you need.
There you go. So prioritize what's important to you.
Yes.
That's my takeaway with that. So if it's Diona, food is number one.
No, it's not number one, but it's in my top five. It's in my top five, right?
So that's a good thing.
Academics
to remember.
is first, though.
Yeah.
Academics is always first.
What's the top key things
Yes.
that a student is interested in the school? What's important to you as a student? Your major. Maybe it's the location. Maybe it is resources that are available to the student. Sometimes students have specific learning challenges, and they need to make sure that they have the academic or emotional support that can really help them thrive and be the best student that they can be. And it varies amongst campuses. So again, if that's in your top 5, that's a priority. Make sure that's something that you keep up front as well. These are my top schools, but these are my top needs. And then I also say have a needs and a wants list. These are the top things these are the things I absolutely need. These are the things that I absolutely want.
Right.
If you can have both, that's great. If you can't, make sure all of your needs are met.
Absolutely.
And it's still being done in and that you go and it's still affordable to you. That to me would be ideal. Before we wrapped up though, I did want to actually specifically highlight a few of the questions that I did see on our brochure because I want students to know. It's called Navigating a College Fair, How to Navigate a College Fair. And it's one that's available on our website at PHEAA.org on our online ordering option. It's something that students can just upload or they can actually have it mailed to them and they'll get a hard copy. But just a couple that we see out here. One of the questions, and we talked about these, what majors do you offer? Which have the best job placement rates? Sometimes students don't think about that, especially if they're nervous, but it's a good question to ask. Which percentage of your students graduate on time? We actually talked about that one as well. What companies recruit your graduates? Some schools have a really, really good placement percentage, and they have great relationships with businesses. And while other schools, that's not their specialty. That's just not what they do. But if it's important to you, then make sure that you check into that. Also, how do I schedule the campus visit? We talked about doing that. So those are just a handful of questions that I see off at the top that I think students could benefit from, parents could benefit from. And I also say for even the schools who are there, make sure that, I think it would be nice if they could make sure that they had a list of sample questions for students just to kind of help them out. To say, hey, you know what, come on over to my table, let's talk, take a look. They could see the questions and they go from there. I
think a good technique to use is if you do have students that aren't engaging a lot or asking a lot of questions, for the representative to say, hey, this is a lot of questions that other students ask and then kind of go from there to start that conversation going. And then that might spur other questions once they hear some sample questions of what others are asking. Another nice one that is on our brochure that I wanted to point out is, do you offer merit-based aid and do you offer scholarships? So again, going back to that financial piece, making sure that you're aware of that. And then another one is, how much does your average graduate borrow? So that's another important one that will kind of give you an insight as to, what type of debt you might be going into in order to go to that school. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
And then another one, we probably could come up with them all day long, but another one that I do think is good. What percentage of your students graduate on time?
Yes.
And also I think sometimes, and you can usually see this information on the school's websites as well too, but sometimes schools don't have a very high graduation rate.
Mhm.
Inquire as to why. Why
Right.
aren't your students graduating? What is the challenge? Or there's a high transfer rate. And at the end of a FAFSA application, you can also see it. Usually will tell you the school's graduation rate, their transfer rate, and their retention rate. So it's
Yep.
going to tell you that. If your retention rate is really low, why aren't you retaining your students?
Right.
It's a good question to ask, before you actually say, hey, we're going to sit there. Are there issues amongst within the school? Is it a financial thing?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're just next to a military town and you have a lot of families coming in and out. It has nothing to do with their graduation rate. Transfer rate's high because they're moving on to their next assignment or something like that. But
yeah, it could definitely be a red flag if that rate is giving you some pause. So definitely want to look at that.
Yep. So I think for the most part, what we really wanted to do with this hot topic, and hopefully we've done that for those who are listening, is to just give them an idea of how to navigate through a college fair. Also, this is still college fair season. So right now, lots of college fairs are going on in individual communities, in high schools, just about everywhere right now, locally, nationally. There are national college fairs, regional college fairs. Take advantage of them. Don't miss the opportunity. This is one of the few instances, I think, where a student can really have like a quick look of a variety of schools at minimal cost to them.
Absolutely.
It's going to cost you a little bit of your time to engage with them, but most of these college fairs are free.
Yep.
I'm not sure if there are some that do charge, but hopefully they're minimal charges if they are, but it's not as if you have to get in the car, gas up, and go visit each of these campuses. So I think they're great. It's a great opportunity for students. I think it's a great opportunity for those post-secondary schools. For those of you who are listening in with us today, if you have not yet attended a college fair and you have someone or you have a school that you're interested in, by all means, see if they're coming to a college fair in your area. You can also go to different websites, talk to your schools, talk to your guidance staff to find out if they have college fairs or even college visits that are about to take place. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that you can download our How to Navigate a College Fair brochure. It's available again at PHEAA.org, PHEAA.org. Did I miss anything for our hot topic segment?
I don't think so. I think we hit all the key points.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us again today on the Higher Education Access Corner. And we'll see you again, hopefully sometime soon for the next hot topic.
Thank you.